好簡單嘅啫，呢個小組要討論嘅嘢。咁我哋夠人有。
We have a quorum and it is the appointed time. Let me call the meeting to order. First, we need to elect a chairman. Can we have a nomination? A valid nomination has been made or will have to be made orally by a member and must be seconded orally by another member, and the member nominated must accept the nomination. Ms. Sito, nominated by Mr. Frankie Yik, seconded by Mr. Wu Chi-wai. I accept nomination, so we don't have to swap seats. Let us invite the administration to come in right away. I think we'll have a short meeting. This is not the first time the Legislative Council has looked at these memorandum. At the panel, we actually held a special meeting to scrutinize this issue. I believe if we go about our meeting effectively, we will have just one meeting, and that will do. Mr. Sin Chung Kai wrote in to say he withdraws from the subcommittee, and that has been copied for members' information. Now I'd like to introduce members from the administration. We know them well. Mr. Andrew Lai, Deputy Director from EPD, and then Mr. Mok Wai Chun, Assistant Director from EPD, and Mr. Dave Ho, PEPO from EPD. The two officials at the back are responsible for air quality monitoring. Mr. Lai, would you like to take us through the paper? Good morning, Chairman and members. At the end of September, we introduced this fourth TM to members at the EA panel. We had members support, and the TM had been gazetted as subsidiary legislation. And now we are still within the scrutiny period. Let me talk about the background. We are very much concerned about emissions by power plants. So from 2008, we made use of the Air Quality Control Ordinance to formulate technical memoranda, which is subsidiary legislation, in order to cap the emission of the two power plants. We look at the three major pollutants: sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxide, and respirable suspended particulates. When we put a cap on such emission, the director or the secretary for the environment would put public health at the forefront. And we also look at the best practicable means, or BPM, and also we want to achieve the air quality objectives. We are proposing the fourth TM for members' scrutiny and support this time around. If members will support them, this will become effective or come into effect in January 2019. Compared to previous TMs, this one is not very different. First, we will look at the relevant factors for consideration. Number one, the trend of power generation in Hong Kong and the demand. Is it on the rise? If it is on the rise, then there may be the need for more electricity and therefore more emission. Number two, we'd like to see whether the power plants will make capital asset investment in order to improve the emission performance. Number three, energy supply. Now, power plants make use of coal and natural gas the most. Now, can we do something about the fuel mix? Can we maintain the fuel quality? These are objective standards in order for us to cap the allowances. In 2012, the LegCo supported the third TM, which will come into effect in 2017. Compared to that one, we are narrowing and tightening up the emission allowances, and we consider three things. Number one, power generation. The HEC, which operates on Hong Kong Island, compared to the third TM for 2017, power generation or electricity demand will be reduced by around 4%. So we are going to reduce its emission allowance. As for CLP, because of infrastructure and new town development, electricity generation in 2019 will increase by about 4% as compared to the projection for 2017. And we have to make allowances for the emission cap. At the same time, we consider a second factor. In the past few years, the two power plants retrofitted emission reduction devices. When we projected the emission allowance, we would of course look at the design standard of the various devices. But if we look at these past 2 years, the two power plants have made use of the emission reduction techniques, and the result is better than expected. And so after talking to the two power plants, we think there is room for us to tighten up the assumptions when we look at their emission performance. Now, of course, we have to rely on the power plants to maintain a high standard of repair and maintenance. Number 3, the West-East Gas Pipeline 2 natural gas delivery, or WEP2. We used the standard and specifications 2 years ago in order to use that as a basis for projection. And if we look at the past 2 years, the actual sulfur content was much less than that prescribed in the supply contract. So after talking to the power companies, we agreed that we should look at the actual performance in order to tighten up the emission allowances. So the result is that for HEC, with regard to the 3 pollutants, we see room for tightening up the emission caps. For CLP, we can see that we can tighten up the SO2 emission, but for the other 2, we can keep the status quo. This is the result after very detailed consideration of the different circumstances of the 2 power plants. But I'd like to mention 2 other points. Number 1, this is totally based on the 3rd TM, which was formulated 2 years ago, and the fuel mix that we had 2 years ago, and also the power plant generation units 2 years ago, and we did some fine-tuning of that TM. Secondly, members must be very concerned about the consultation results for post-2020 fuel mix. The Bureau is now collating public opinion collected, and we hope there will be some publication next year. When we have more idea and when we have come to a conclusion to the post-2020 fuel mix, we will write a new TM next year basing on the fuel mix post-2020, and we'll revisit the 2 power plants emission caps. So this one, TM, will come into effect in 2019, but we very much hope that we will have a new TM, the 5th one, on the basis of the new fuel mix. I think I will pause here, and I will be happy to take questions. Any questions, members? Before you have questions, then let me ask a question. By 2020, you say there will be a new TM. You did not say so at the last special meeting of the panel. We asked you about fuel mix at the meeting, but is that some kind of new development between the last panel meeting and today? No, it is not a new development. I believe at the panel last time we did say that since members are very concerned about the emission reduction targets for 2020, and I can say frankly to members that if we only go for the regulation under the 4th TM, we'll not be able to achieve the objective set for 2020. So we have to adjust the fuel mix to make it cleaner, so that by 2020 we can achieve the emission reduction targets and the new AQOs. Therefore, next year, when we publish the review results of the fuel mix, we should write a new TM for it to come into effect by 2020. We must do that. Well, we can all imagine that you are going to have more use of nuclear energy, but that is very controversial. I believe some members and myself are in opposition. But never mind. Let us not talk about the argument over the use of more nuclear energy. Now, if you really go for more nuclear energy and you say you reduce the emission cap, does it mean that will only be done on a pro rata basis? In other words, you may also tighten up the emission cap for coal and natural gas. Thank you, Chairman. According to the consultation at the beginning of the year about fuel mix, we talked about two options, and that is to increase the proportion of natural gas in power generation locally, so we can have more environmentally friendly electricity generation. Secondly, we can import electricity from the mainland, so we do not have to generate so much electricity locally. And that is between grid purchase and local generation. Basically, these are the two directions in which the Bureau sought public views. We did not say anything about the particular ratio of nuclear energy. This is what we consulted the public on. Secondly, when we have a conclusion on the fuel mix post 2020, we still have to look at one point. That is the electricity demand post 2020. If it continues to go up, then perhaps there is a need to give a bigger allowance to the two power plants. But on the other hand, we also have to look at the exact fuel mix. If we go for more grid purchase, then perhaps we can have more room to reduce the emission caps. But if we still go for local generation, and of course we will speed up the phasing out of coal-fired generation units and go for cleaner production, then we might have to look at the speed of emission reduction again. But first of all, we have to have a conclusion on the fuel mix first. Well, talking about the fuel mix, apart from importing nuclear energy from the mainland, we were talking about making use of electricity generated in provinces which have a counter cycle compared to Hong Kong, and that is when they have residual power, they can send the electricity to Hong Kong. And we were talking about Yunnan, which uses hydropower. And we also said that we should go for renewable energy, but not nuclear energy. I can see two hands, Frankie Yik and Wu Chi Wai, 7 minutes for each. Frankie Yik. Thank you, Chairman. Last time at the panel, I asked the administration whether they have considered affordability of the public when you look at the different emission standards. You said that that was not within your jurisdiction. And also I asked, when we set these standards, how do we compare with advanced countries in the world? Are we more advanced or do we lag behind them? Let us choose two countries from Europe, two countries in North America. Can we tabulate the emission standards there and ours so we know where we stand?
Mr. Lai, when it comes to comparison with other countries, I will defer to Mr. Mok shortly. In relation to the first part of your question, when we formulate the technical memorandum and what we take into consideration, well, When it comes to the formulation of the subsidiary legislation of the emission allowances, we refer to Section 26G of the Air Pollution Control Ordinance, which states that the Secretary for Environment, when making an allocation of emission allowances, should take into consideration 3 factors, namely, A, have regard to the best practicable means for preventing the emission of that type of pollutant. B, have on its purpose the attainment and maintenance of any relevant air quality objective. And C, have regard to whether the emission of that type of pollutant would be likely to be prejudicial to health. And indeed, under the law, there are 3 factors only. You must understand that when the ordinance was enacted 3 or 4 decades ago, well, the working environment was in the minds of the legislators. Of course, there's a cost for clean energy. Natural gas costs more than coal. So when we're making the formulation, the power companies may have to make more capital investment, which will have an implication on tariff. When we formulate energy policy, it's clearly stated that there are 4 crucial considerations. That is the reliability, safety, cost, and environmental protection performance. And when it comes to the tariff or affordability, of course, they are considered by the administration. Before we hear from Mr. Mok, I would like the administration to consider this. Last time, we proposed to use tens of billions of dollars to replace diesel vehicles. In Hong Kong U, there was this index formulated by an academic. Well, for 2012 or 13, for premature death, we're talking about every year $40 billion a year. Of course, we have to move along the lines of the international trend. But if we are to move forward our timetable, of course, Hong Kong's air will be better, healthcare cost will be lower. And in Hong Kong, most of it is paid by the public sector. And if we are to achieve these goals, power companies will have to charge more. So is that the case that at a certain stage, the administration should shoulder some of the cost because they have saved on health care? There may be some subsidy provided by the government instead of taking it out from the pockets of the general public. Can you quantify the social cost? Mr. Mok? Thank you. In answer to your question, I would like to refer to 26G. If you look at A, is the best practicable means. What are best practicable means? It's implied that that it will be reasonable. Say, for example, they will not be required to demolish the entire generation unit and replace it with a new one. Well, but we were talking about changing the fuel mix, and the cost will increase by 100 times, 100%. Well, you now say that you have to meet these targets, and you will have to do it. Can I have maybe 2 minutes? But you only have, the member only has 7 minutes. Can I maybe finish my answer? I haven't finished yet. Well, for new generation units or power stations, of course, there is a consensus. There is consensus when it comes to the fuel mix. But for the TM, we're under the discussion today. We're talking about existing power stations. As we've explained, that when it comes to our considerations, it's the case that given the existing equipment, facilities, and technology, what are the means that can be put in place to reduce emission? So we're talking about best practicable means. When we take reference from overseas countries, they will add emission reduction devices to existing stations. And for the existing stations in Hong Kong, there is little room in this regard. So perhaps we can give priority to cleaner generation units over older ones. And this is also similar to the practice adopted by overseas countries, because either you will install more emission reduction devices or use the cleaner ones first. So we'll ask them to maintain good upkeep of maintenance and repair of existing units. And this is in line with the practice of overseas countries. For this TM, we're talking about existing equipment, and for new ones, well, there should be first consensus. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. I understand that this technical memorandum TM relates to existing fuel mix and existing power generation unit. I asked this question in the past. This is about 2019. That means that the emission reduction devices installed will be quite old by then. And what are the implications? Well, if the depreciation of the equipment will reduce its performance, what's left will be the increase in the natural gas in the fuel mix for them to meet the targets. But we can't say that the price for natural gas in the future will not have any impact on tariff. So in your opinion, you think that the existing emission reduction devices are very stable, so much so that in 2019 it will not affect the fuel mix. And I know that we are going to talk about the fuel mix soon. Perhaps in 2020 there will be a new fuel mix, so there will be one more year for this TM. Assuming that in 2020 there will be a new TM, does it mean that there will only be 1 year for this TM? Because after a year there will be a new one in 2020. Is there any urgency or necessity? Under the requirement of the TM, there will be a review of the emission allowance at least once every 2 years. So, well, the last one would take effect on 2017. So, in 2 years, after 2 years, and we have to formulate another one for 2019. So the next time will be 2016. When we prepare the TM for 2021. And this time, we make it clear that next year, we will review the emission allowance based on the result from the consultation of review on fuel mix. Yes. This TM, the fourth one, may only be valid for 1 year because if there is another TM formulated next year in 2015 to take effect in 2020, then this fourth TM will only be valid for 1 year. And if there is room for improvement when it comes to emission allowance, why don't we seize the opportunity to improve it for the time after 2017? If we are to wait for the result of the possible change in the fuel mix, then we will have wasted 1 year. Of course, we will take into account the result of the review of the fuel mix. According to the law, we have to give at least 4 years advance notice for power companies to make adjustments. We can't give them a target and not the time to achieve it. In relation to your first question, the allowance is based on existing fuel mix and existing generation units. We do not require power companies to make significant changes to existing units or stations or fuel mixes. Say, for example, desulfurization devices or emission reduction devices. Back to Mr. Wu's point, existing units have been in operation for 2 or 3 decades. It's almost time for them to retire. And if there is a decision related to fuel mixes, then these coal-fired generation units may officially retire. But when it comes to whether there will be new units established or purchased from mainland power grid, that is for the next TM. And there is no such change in this regard, in this technical memorandum. So assuming that, is it the case that you have taken into account the depreciation and wear and tear of the generation units and the station and the equipment in the stations? Well, when we look at the depreciation of the units, we also look at the pollution reduction devices. The units themselves are working quite well. So what we look at are mostly the retrofitted devices, say, for example, the sulfide reduction devices. And they have accumulated some experience in this regard. There aren't many moving parts in these desulfurization devices, so depreciation is little. We told the power companies that without moving parts, there should be little depreciation, and they agreed that the targets we've set them are practicable ones. I have some questions in the second round. That is in relation to tariffs, as mentioned by members, and possible new fuel mixes and new generation units. There is a guarantee return for the 2 power companies is calculated based on the capital investments. If there is a 5th TM for 2020, of course, when it comes to reduction, the more the better. If we can get more reduction in 2019, we should go ahead for as long as possible. And then for 2020, there will be a new calculation. Maybe these are 2 separate matters, but for the public, they are just one single matter.
Every year you talk to the 2 power companies about profit control under the scheme of control. Then you have to tell us how tariff is calculated. And also, I think you should calculate the social cost as soon as possible and what kind of medical costs can be saved. And the saved medical cost should be a cross-subsidy for tariffs to be paid by the public. We all want clean air. We understand that costs money. But if you have saved some money on a certain front, you should plow it back to the tariff so it can be reduced. Number 2, the RSP. I forgot to ask you this question at the last special meeting of the panel. We now understand RSP can be big or small. Your allowance, do you include PM 2.5 or only PM 10? I remember you didn't include PM 2.5 in the last TM, but while we are tightening up the emission allowances, do you also seek to include smaller RSP because these can be more easily inhaled and are difficult to remove? Thank you for those 3 questions, Chairman. Talking about PM 2.5 and PM 10, I can defer to Mr. Mok to give you more detailed information. I will now respond to the other 2 questions by the Chairman. You talk about the scheme of control and the fuel mix and also the TM imposing allowances. Those are 3 things that are happening. This time around, we discuss the TM and we focus on the environment effect of the emissions, seeking to put a cap on the emissions. What I was saying was that in the 4th TM, the allowances are based or calculated basing on the existing fuel mix, and we do not require the power plants to make big capital investments. Our assessment is that the power plants should not have to face a lot of pressure to adjust the tariffs because of the new TM allowances. Just now, the Chairman asked about tariffs post-2020. I think that would depend on 2 factors that the Chairman herself mentioned. Number 1, what will be the fuel mix for after 2020? That will certainly have a direct impact on tariffs. When the Environment Bureau announces the consultation results of the fuel mix, we will all have a clearer understanding of that. The second factor affecting tariff is, as you mentioned, is the scheme of control agreements with the 2 power plants. If I remember correctly, the 2 agreements should expire in 2019. What will be the next step? Will the 2 power companies still be regulated by the agreements? Will there be new requirements on the calculation of profit or return? These have to be resolved later, but the Bureau and the administration will certainly consult the public and the Legislative Council in due course. My own assessment is that we cannot be sure of what long-term impact there will be on tariffs. The second point has to do with social cost. We agree with Mr. Frankie Yik and the Chairman that we all want clean air. If we can improve air quality, we can save medical and even economic costs. So the administration has commissioned a university to do research on social and medical costs resulting from air pollution. We hope the research can be completed next year and we will be able to let you know the results. But one thing is sure. When the administration seeks to improve air quality, we also consider the factor of cost effectiveness. We want to see clean air, but we also want to see how we can achieve the biggest effect, and that is by targeting some pollutants. If the administration would like to fork $100, for example, should we tackle roadside car pollution, or should we seek to control the emissions from the power plants? With regard to PM10 and PM2.5, there is no distinction in this TM. I'd like the administration to give us a paper. The Council will not stand in the way of this TM being supported, but please supply us with extra information. In the new TM that will be drafted later, I'm asking you to distinguish between PM10 and PM2.5. You should have different emission allowances for these two types of RSPs. Then we can consider helping you formulate the caps. Yes, I'm afraid I don't have enough time. You can reply to me later. I'm the chairman and I have to be fair. Mr. Tenkapu, 7 minutes. Yeah, that's a long time. Thank you. When there will not be a sustained impact on tariff or there will not be a lot of social cost, I would of course welcome the tightening up of emission allowances. If I may look at page 2 of the paper, it is said that HEC will have a decrease of 4% compared to 2017, but there will be an increase for CLP by 4%. Now certainly they use different base figures. And you have also tabulated for us the allowances for the 3 pollutants. But I'd like to ask about the impact on tariff. You said that you look at the asset value and also the fuel cost. For HEC, are you seeing a decreasing trend because there is no infrastructure, no increase in population, and maybe energy saving has been done well? Do you expect a continuous decreasing trend? If that's the case, maybe we want to look at a checklist of the HEC generation units. Maybe we are not using those units, however, those are factored into the calculation of the tariff. So, can you let us look at the list of generation units or assets and which are calculated towards the tariff? And on the other hand, CLP is seeing an increase of demand. By 2019, you say the emission caps will not have any impact on tariff. But do you expect CLP to have to increase units for generation in order to tackle the rising demand? Because if they do, there will be an impact on tariffs. Thank you for those 2 questions, Mr. Tang. Talking about the relationship between generation units and tariff, members can be reassured. According to the formulation of the 4th TM, which will come into effect in 2019, we have based on the existing number of units. We do not require them to build new units by making new investments. We are going to discuss with them that aspect after we have got a new fuel mix. So there should not be any major capital investment, and therefore there should not be any impact on tariff. As for the forecast of generation volume, the Bureau is watching very closely. Every year, we ask the 2 power companies to estimate the generation volume, and that has to be confirmed by the Bureau. It is not up to the 2 companies to make their estimates and then they can adjust their assets or generation mode as they like. That's not the case. As for the actual impact, when the 4th TM comes into effect in 2019, the 2 power plants will still just be using their existing units, making use of coal or natural gas. In the case of CLP, if their coal-fired units reach saturation of capacity, because we have told the 2 power plants to make the best use of natural gas units because they are more environmentally friendly. However, if they have used their natural gas units to capacity, then they can only go for producing electricity with coal-fired generation units more. that goes to explain why we are only talking about a 4% adjustment, but we can sometimes reduce the allowances by over 10%. Look at HEC. If there is less electricity generated, then that means they would be using less the coal-fired units. So it is not a linear projection. Well, this is exactly the point I'm driving at. Is it that HEC doesn't need so many generation units? They, of course, would like to have more assets because that will calculate towards the tariff. And you say there will be a decrease of 4% in 2 years' time, but then we do not expect a lot of new population on Hong Kong Island, and we should expect a decreasing trend. Have you looked at the assets, and do you think they need so much asset? We understand Mr. Tang's concern. The Environment Bureau's role is to invoke the AQO to regulate the emission of the two companies. We make use of the AQCO. As to the estimate of power production and also investment in generation units, that is not within the terms of reference of the Environment Bureau. Maybe I can take the question back and we can come back with a supplementary paper. I don't think the information is confidential. I hope you will list the generation units of the two power companies and let us know whether they are still regarded as part of the assets, because some of the units might have already expired as far as their service or serviceable life is concerned. And if you look at HEC, the power generation is really on the decrease. And then making use of the same logic, CLP sees a rise in demand. Does it mean that they should buy more units, or else they would be forced to make use of the coal-fired units more, and therefore the emission will be worsened? Thank you. Mr. Tang, your analysis about CLP is logical. Given the same number of units, if the CLP has already made use of the natural gas units to the full, then it can only opt for using the coal-fired units more in order to meet demand. And there will be some impact on emissions. Any other members asking questions in the first round? If not, second round, Mr. Frankie Yik and Mr. Wu Chi Wai. 7 minutes. Because as you see, 7 minutes would be more meaningful. 3 minutes will be just too short. So I will be asking how many members would like to ask questions. If many people would like to queue up, then I will adjust the time. But now, still 7 minutes. Mr. Frankie Yik, thank you. Mr. Mok, you explained to me your approach. I understand it. I'd just like you to give me some information because I don't have it at hand. And that is the air quality standards and how we compare with advanced countries. You can supply that information later. I also thank the chairman for supporting my argument. That is, if we reduce emission, there must be a cost for doing it. The members of the public will have to shoulder it, and I understand the two power plants are not making major investments now, but next year when we have concluded a new fuel mix, and if people are saving medical costs, then perhaps you should make use of that kind of savings towards the calculation of tariffs. And let me make this bold assumption. Supposing the agreements for profit control will stand, and as I said, the coal-fired units have been used for a long time now, and in the 5th TM, if we enhance the emission allowances even more, then they might have to replace certain units.
For these capital investments, the administration said that, well, maybe, say, for example, there will be a saving of $10 billion from medical costs. Then perhaps the administration can shoulder the cost for the capital investments. And as a result, power companies will not ask for a raise in tariffs because they have to make more in investment. And that is just an idea, because I think that we all have a responsibility to shoulder. I hope that you will be committed to it instead of just shifting the responsibility to someone else. Do you need a reply? No. I just need some supplementary information from the administration. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. In this TM, it says that one of the reasons there is room for reduction is because the quality of the natural gas from the west-east gas pipe is of a higher quality. But we also learned that it's quite pricey. And because of the possible fuel mix change, they are trying to source it from somewhere else. But we're talking about supply. Maybe that will have an impact on the ability to reduce emission. Because of the natural gas supplied by the WEP, the CLP may be subject to certain restrictions. And if they manage to source it from somewhere else, but the gas is of a lower quality, it will also have an impact on tariff. For the two power companies, apart from supplying natural gas from the WEP, would you allow them to consider other suppliers? The sulfur content of natural gas from WEP is lower than the limit prescribed in the contract. That is a fact, and that is a reason. One of the reasons, not the only reason, when we consider asking for more reduction. At the time when the contract was assigned, the sulfur content is 200 milligram, and the actual content is only about 15 milligram. And if we use the actual sulfide content to make the calculation, there is room for further reduction. We've made it clear to the power companies that this time round, when we set the emission allowances, we have used the basis for the actual sulfide content in the past year or two. And if in the future the sulfide content of natural gas is higher but still lower than the limit in the contract, then we will have to give regard to that. If the two power companies have done everything they can, and the only thing that is different is the sulfide content of the natural gas, then we have to treat it on a special case, and maybe allow them a little bit of elbow room, because we can't have the best of both worlds. But we set the limit in the contract. I understand that there is a need for flexibility. What I am asking is whether there is room for the two power companies to source it from another supplier. If the CLP finds another supplier, say for example, is cheaper, well, perhaps let me first give you this information about the sulfide content. As Mr. Lai said, according to the contract, is 200 milligram per cubic meter. And in the past, the actual sulfide content was as low as just over 10 milligrams. The supplier, especially when it comes to compressed natural gas, is obtained from different locations, so there is a difference depending on the material that form the natural gas. And for Yacheng, they are actually using compressed natural gas from another location. The sulfide content is also low, but maybe sometimes not as low as 10 or so. Apart from compressed natural gas, is there any liquefied natural gas? And during the during the process, there may be a desulfurization, so the sulfide content may be even lower. So we have taken reference from the content from the level in the past. We set a reasonable level. And in the end, the power companies, whether it's HEC or CLP, they discuss with us, knowing our reason behind, and they fully understand that. Yes, that I understand. I want to know, yes, there may be a change or difference in the quality of the natural gas. But what if the two power companies can source the natural gas from a different supplier? However, the sulfide content may be higher. Can they use that as a reason to ask for a change? Say, for example, I can source the natural gas at a lower price, but the sulfide content is higher. Would you consider that request? We have taken that into consideration under the mechanism. Mr. Wu, you are concerned that the restriction may be too restrictive for the power companies. To the extent that they cannot source it from a different supplier. When we consider the emission allowance under the mechanism, we have also considered whether what we ask for is too restrictive. Say, we know that the actual sulfide content in WEP, which is a compressed natural gas, is lower. We also consider the sulfide content of the natural gas from Yacheng. We give them a bit of elbow room as well, and we do not restrict that to compressed natural gas. They are also allowed to use liquefied natural gas. We have taken that into consideration when setting the emission allowance. And the power companies know that they are in a position to consider using a different supplier because we have given them room to maneuver. But it's the end of 2014 and we have yet to start the third technical memorandum, which is for 2017. And the TM makes it very clear that the two power companies will have to continue to maintain the percentage of natural gas at 50% in their fuel mix. There will be population increase in the catchment area for the CLP, and there are a lot of infrastructural projects. I'm not even talking about 2019. Well, there will be an increase in power consumption for CLP. So will they have sufficient generation units to keep the natural gas percentage at 50% for 2019? Because you have to bear in mind that the population increase is quite significant for CLP, and also there are a lot of infrastructure projects there. And you also said that before 2019, there will be complete phasing out of heavy fuel oil by ultra-low sulfur diesel for assisting coal burning. Is it the case that there is a change of fuel, or is it the case that heavy fuel oil is needed in the generation unit, and the generation unit will be phased out by then? Or is it the case that it's just only a change of the fuel oil and the generation unit is still there? Well, we see that there has been improvement, but seems that ozone is still a problem that remains unresolved. I know that when it comes to ozone, it's something to do with the regional situation as well. Will the emission reduction help when it comes to ozone reduction? When it comes to dealing with ozone and how it's related to generation units, I will defer to my colleague later. When it comes to generation units, whether it is 2017 or 2019, the assumption is that the two power companies will be using existing units and the same percentage of natural gas. And in the second or the third TM, we asked the two power companies to make maximum use of the natural gas generation units, supported or complemented by coal-fired generation units. For CLP, if the output is increasing and the number of generation units remains the same, then there is a need to use more coal-fired units. We have spoken to the two power companies, and they told us that they are confident that they will be able to meet the demand for 2017 and 2019 with existing units. But when it comes to new units, of course that they can do better when it comes to reliability or safety. In any event, existing units are sufficient to meet demand. Okay, you can meet the demand, but can they keep the percentage of natural gas at 50%? With the tightening of emission allowance, there is a need for them to at least keep the percentage of natural gas at the current level, or maybe have to increase it. But well, how can they, with more power output, how can they keep it at 50%?
Mr. Mark, let us look at 2019 and what will happen then. You are correct. There will be more demand for electricity, and they may need to make use of their coal-fired units and natural gas units more. But let us look at the overall situation. Half of the power generation in Hong Kong will be done by using natural gas. I think they will be near that target by 2019. It will be very close to 50%. As for your first question, the units making use of heavy oil, do we need new units? Well, actually, no. The coal-fired units have a characteristic. When coal is in the unit, it has to be ignited, and also the fire should be kept stable. And all along, they have been using heavy fuel oil. And we have been asking them to convert those units to use ultra-low sulfur diesel in order to reduce emissions. So the unit remains the same. It's just that they use a different kind of fuel. And ozone, it is more complicated. It is not emitted by power plants. It is not any kind of pollutant, but the VOC and also NOx, these are mixed together. When we tackle ozone, we must work together with the mainland. We must at the same time reduce VOC both on the mainland and Hong Kong, and also the emission of NOx. Now we seek to reduce emission of NOx from power plants, from vehicles, and from industrial sources, so we can benefit the entire region. Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. I am interested in this question, and I'd like to ask a follow-up. The WEP2 agreement talks about a 200 milligram. I'm not sure about the unit, but let us go for the figure of 15. In other words, well, CLP should have come to grips with the sulfur content of any supply they are purchasing. So the DD or Mr. Mock, can you confirm this? No matter where the gas comes from, the sulfur content will remain at 15 to 20%. Is that right? I'd like to clarify that point, please, so we are reassured, so that we know after having the new TM, we will not be limiting the choices of the two power companies to source new supply of gas. I understand Mr. Wu is concerned about one thing, and that is whether the emission allowances will make it impossible for the power companies to source the supply of natural gas. Now, the answer is in the negative, because we understand that the two power companies do not solely rely on WEP2 for natural gas. CLP has been getting gas from Yacheng for over 20 years, and they have worked with Australia and also Qatar for natural gas. So that is already their commercial policy. We therefore think that the operation is smooth. And since we know the sulfur content of WEP2, we can ask Mr. Mock to supplement whether that will be sustained. The two companies understand that the suppliers will usually talk about a new sulfur content first. Sometimes it is set at 15%, sometimes much higher. But even if we go for the maximum sulfur content, they will not be limited in their sourcing for natural gas, as we were talking about Yacheng, we are talking about more or less the same sulfur content. And the sulfur content would even be lower for liquefied natural gas. The two companies agreed with this maximum level because they know they will have no problem complying with it, and also they know that they will not be constrained in sourcing for natural gas. Well, Chairman, I understand the department's explanation. I'm just asking you to let me know the actual sulfur content of the different supply sources. You are making use of the sulfur content of WEP2 to draw up the TM4, but I'd just like to know how that compares with other sources of natural gas. Okay, I can give a quick reply. Number one, I want to clarify we don't only consider natural gas from WEP2, but also natural gas from Yacheng, etc. We also look at other sources for natural gas, and we believe they will have no problem complying with that cap. Can you provide some basic information? Can you let us know the performance of different sources of natural gas? We can do that in a supplementary paper. Mr. Frankie Yik. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Wu's question. And my simple question is, say if we buy diesel, we talk about low sulfur content. We have an international standard, and ULSD, we also have an international standard. Then is there a commonly accepted international standard for natural gas? You're shaking your head, so there is none. Then you have to list the different contents for us. But then if you go for commercially traded natural gas, then there should be a kind of standard internationally, and that will resolve our problem. Mr. Mok, we don't have that kind of international standard because there is a big number of suppliers for natural gas. It's just like crude oil being refined in Singapore. Natural gas has also to be refined first. Now, I don't think you can buy polluted natural gas in the market. Well, it's like this. When we talk about natural gas, we talk about 200 milligram per square meter. And you may think that 200 is a high figure, but in fact it is not. But today we are talking about a cap, and I'm saying we have room for tightening up the allowances. This is something very different from crude oil, but we can supply a paper afterwards. Thank you. Mr. Mok, would you like to also respond briefly to my point on PM 2.5 and PM 10, and whether you can separate them when you draw up allowances in the TM? Thank you. Ever since the publication of the third TM, the Public Accounts Committee of LegCo requested us to see whether it is feasible to go for PM 2.5. So in the paper, in the special meeting, we told members that we did that research. We looked at whether in advanced countries PM 2.5 was subject to an emission cap, and if yes, why? If not, then also why? We looked at Europe and the US. They do not put a cap on PM 2.5 because right now it is not possible to measure PM 2.5 in a chimney. You can do so on the roadside, but it is very difficult to find a representative figure for PM 2.5 in a chimney. Therefore, there is no emission cap for PM 2.5 even in advanced countries. But does it mean that we cannot control PM 2.5 and that we do not have to do anything? That's not the case, because we can use the same pollution control measures to control PM 10 and PM 2.5, for example, static dust remover and also the desulfurization devices. we can reduce the emission of PM10 and PM2.5. So power companies are also reducing the emission of PM2.5 because afterwards, in any case, PM2.5 is part of PM10. We also want to have a cap for PM2.5, but technically, we cannot do it for the moment. But we will promise that we will keep abreast of technical developments. Since we are in the Environment Department, we'd like to do a better job. Okay, if there are no more questions, can the clerk let us know what will happen from this point on? Thank you, Chairman. According to the legislative timetable, we should report to the House on the 7th of November. And also, before the 11th of November, we have to submit the written report. Because of time constraint, I'd like to see whether the chairman and members will consider extending the scrutiny period. If you agree, the chairman can move a motion to extend the scrutiny period to the 10th of December, either on the 12th or 19th of November, and then we can submit a written report to the House on the 28th of November. And the deadline for giving notice to move any amendment will be the 3rd of December. Well, actually, if there will be no amendments, it can come into effect automatically. Can we ask the clerk why we need an extension just because of the report to the House, since members are not going to move any amendments? If there will be no extension of the scrutiny period, we'll have to give a written report to the House by the 11th of November. Today is the 5th already. Time is a bit tight. I hope the officials will also understand the workload of our secretariat. But we can see that the subcommittee agrees with the TM and members. You are not considering repealing the TM, right? Either you can opt to repeal it or you have to accept it. So if you do not propose any amendments, and since the TM will come into effect only in 2019, even if we extend the scrutiny period, we will not be putting obstacles on the way of the administration. But since the Secretariat has asked for it, we will seek an extension of the scrutiny period. If there is nothing else, the scrutiny of the TM4 is completed today. The administration has promised to give supplementary papers. When will they be available? Any questions raised at this subcommittee have nothing to do with the extension of the scrutiny period, unless they come back with the supplementary papers and members request a meeting. Again, there will be no direct causal link between this and the scrutiny period being extended. Members can still ask for a meeting after getting the papers. So after the administration comes back with the papers, they will be issued to members. Members may need another meeting. If that's the case, just tell the clerk. Thank you very much. Thank you.